Again, welcome to Training Tuesday. Your sound is working most likely. We're just very silent on the panelist end as we get ready to launch tonight. My name is Bill Brown. I am the Director of New Faith Expressions here in the Baltimore-Washington Conference, and we are excited that you've joined us tonight for our Training Tuesday on the Catalyst Initiative and what it is and how your congregation can apply. But before we launch into all of that, if we could take a moment to center ourselves with a word of prayer. So if you would pray with me, please. Holy and gracious God, you have gathered us together tonight from the reaches of our annual conference. And while we may be separated by distance, we are united in your love. So we ask for your Spirit to be upon us as we gather tonight, oh God, that you would give us insight, wisdom, and understanding so that we can learn about possibilities, so that we can learn about new ways to be the church, particularly as we have gone through such a tumultuous time. So center us, oh God, tonight. Open our ears so that we can hear your voice, open our minds to help us understand, and open our hearts so that we may be filled with your love in the name of Jesus. Amen. So I'm going to let our other panelists introduce themselves, and I'm going to go around the room just based on my screen and invite Christy to introduce herself, and then I'll call out the other two.
Hi, I'm Christy Latona. I am your Director of Connectional Ministries and helping to shepherd along with this wonderful team, the Catalyst Initiative. I'm so excited to be with you tonight.
And Kayla.
Hello, I'm Kayla Spears. I am the Business Data Analyst at the Baltimore-Washington Conference, but I'm also the Project Manager of the Catalyst Initiative.
And last but not least, a new face for all of you, Margarita.
Hi, my name is Margarita. I work with Learning Forte, and I'm the Project Manager helping with the Catalyst Initiative.
Wonderful. I'm going to ask everyone, I've opened the chat for a quick second. If you all could just drop in the chat the name of the church that you are connected with, so we could just, so everyone can kind of see around the room who's with us. And Lavelle United Methodist Church gets the award for being the fastest in the chat tonight. That's wonderful. And we're excited you're here. And to get us started, we have a video that we are going to show you just to highlight kind of what undergirds this understanding of the Catalyst Initiative.
A health crisis, economic uncertainty, racism, social unrest, a divided nation, loneliness, and loss of doing church as we know it. When adversity hits, how do you respond? Are you like a carrot, rigid at the beginning, and then losing form and getting mushy after a season of adversity? Or are you more like an egg, fragile going in, but emerging hardened? Don't let adversity change you. Be like tea that transforms adversity into something good. As Paul writes in Romans 12, do not be conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your minds, so that you may discern what is the will of God, what is good and acceptable and perfect. The Catalyst Initiative accompanies congregations on a year-long journey to learn and discern how to better transform lives and communities in the midst of adversity. Learn more and apply at bwcumc.org/catalyst.
Wonderful. So a couple of notes that I should have started us out with is tonight's webinar is being recorded and will be available later this week on the conference website, as will the slides and the videos that you're seeing tonight. And somebody did ask already if they should be able to see themselves. And if you're new to this kind of a platform in a webinar series, you can see us, but we cannot see you. So if you have a question or want to interact with the panelists tonight, please look for the Q&A button on your screen and you can ask a question. And every once in a while, we'll open the chat for specific questions that we'll ask throughout the evening. But if you have a question for us, please use the Q&A feature. So I get to start off with kind of describing what is the Catalyst Initiative. The Catalyst Initiative is unlike any other program I think our annual conference has offered, because it's not just a one-time training event. It is a process, and it's going to be providing your congregation a 10-month cohort process for you to discover and explore and renew who you are as a congregation. It's going to empower your church to initiate a spirit-led vision and understanding of your community. Through this initiative, you're going to ignite faith into action and invigorate people to claim God's call to empower and enliven your community. We want you to be able to claim your holy imagination. We want you through this to be able to discover ways of expressing your faith that are meaningful and that make a difference in people's lives. We want you to be able to shape new discipleship systems and develop unique metrics for measuring faithfulness. It's going to be a combination of both digital online learning sprints. A learning sprint is going to be a self-paced, interactive learning component where you will be able to get the content and then process it on your own. But there'll also be 3 retreats. At this point, the retreats currently are virtual because of the in the midst of a pandemic, and there'll also be congregational engagement that's going to enable your cohorts to work together and to provide ministry and discipleship. Our whole point is to help you learn to more deeply and intentionally cultivate discipleship. We want you to be able to discern what's going on in your community, in your congregation. We want you to be able to experiment and to build better relationships with one another and with people in your community. We want you to be able to evaluate what you're doing and then design ministry so you have the most meaningful impact. We want you to be able to identify and leverage assets and create alignment and systems so that your ministry is sustainable as we continue to move into the future. This has been, I know, one of the most challenging seasons in the life of the church in anyone's recent memory. And I also know that this Catalyst initiative could not have come at a better time, because all of us are really trying to figure out what is our next faithful step in the life and ministry of a local church. And that's really what the whole initiative is designed to do. And so we're encouraging everyone, and we'll get into the application process in a moment, but we're encouraging everyone to apply, because whether or not your church is selected for this pilot year, in this first year, we'll be selecting 16 congregations, 2 from each district. But even if your church is not selected, through the application process, it is so comprehensive that we'll be able to help you discern what your next faithful step will be within the life of your congregation. And so we'll get into that in a minute, but a couple of things. Let me show you real quick the timeline that we're moving through right now. We can get to there. So right now, the application is already open. It's on the Baltimore-Washington Conference website. And when I say open, the intent to apply application is open. I'll talk about that in a minute. And tonight, you're in the How to Apply webinar. Or if you're watching this later, this is the How to Apply webinar. And your first step when you're finished tonight is to go to the conference website, find the Catalyst Initiative page, and fill out the intent to apply. It's a very short form that just lets us know you're serious about applying, because on our end, there are some material we have to get together for you to be able to do a complete application. And so knowing your intent will help us to better formulate the material that we need in order to help your church apply. And you will be able to see in the chat that landing page for the Catalyst Initiative web address is in the chat. And then you'll have between January 22nd and February 22nd, entire month, to fill out the application. And you'll see when we go through it tonight that it is an extensive application, and there's 2 pieces that will explain in a little more detail that you'll have to do in addition to the online form. There is a MissionInsite download that you'll have to put together, and a Readiness 360 survey that your congregation will have to take. And all of that material, when you hand it in, will be able to help those of us on conference staff not only determine who will be in this first pilot group of churches, but it will also help us to discern and help discern with you what your next faithful step could be. So here's a couple of possibilities of what some next faithful steps could be. Based on your, and I'm just going to go around, based on the information, you could reapply for the Catalyst Initiative cohort next year. This is an ongoing process right now through the funding of the Lilly Foundation. This initiative will be in place for the next 5 years. And so you'll have other opportunities each year to apply if you don't get in this year. There could be resources that will be developed based on the needs that we see come out of the application process. Maybe your church is ready to create new sites and new campuses and reach new people. And so we're launching a new people and new places cohort also coming out in February. Maybe your leadership needs to go to the Financial Leadership Academy or hire a coach to work around a specific issue. So you can see the variety of options. At the very minimum, and I like to say this, at the very minimum, you will receive a tip sheet based on the responses from your Readiness 360 survey that will help guide you as to what your congregation could do to improve. And what I like to say is when I was serving in a local church, my last local church, Wesley Freedom United Methodist Church, we took the Readiness 360 in November of 2014 and began working through the tip sheets that were generated for that congregation. We took the Readiness 360 again 4 years later in 2018, and that showed us that the areas we focused on improved, and so that we could select a whole new area of tips to work on. So they're not boilerplate tips in terms of for every single church you're going to get the exact same tips. They're grouped together that these are the tips that will help your church based on the information we receive in that Readiness 360 plus the other application materials. And so we just want to encourage every congregation to apply because we want to be able to help you discover your next faithful step. And so in order to help you apply, let's walk through with Kayla and Margarita how to do this application.
Thanks, Bill, and good evening, everyone. So now that you are intrigued with what the Catalyst is, let's briefly go over the application. It is purposely, like Bill said, is purposely extensive and will take a while to complete. This is not a last-minute endeavor. You will need a team of 5 to 7, including the pastor, to complete this in its entirety. So your first step, like was mentioned, is to, if you now have already done so, is to fill out the intent to apply form. It's currently on the website, which is in the chat, as well as a PDF version of the full application to familiarize yourself with. The person filling out the intent to apply form will be your point person going forward. Once you complete the intent to apply, you will receive a link to the full application. Just a small note, if you've not already received one, you will receive one in the next day. At this time, you will then want to review the application's parts using the PDF and delegate sections to different members of your team. By week of January 25th, you'll receive an email with your Readiness 360 information to get started on that part of the application process. Once you are in the application, you can save and come back to it. This quick video shows you how.
This is how you fill out the Catalyst Initiative application. Please be sure to enter critical information for us to get a hold of you. If you're unable to finish your application, you can save and continue by entering your email address to save your progress. A unique link will be emailed to you that will allow you to return where you left off. This email link will be sent by Alchemer and give you a link to return back to the application.
Well, once you are filling out the application form, once you're in it, you put all of your information in, your name, your email address. And then once you're going through the application on any of the pages, there is a save button at the top where you will put your email in again, and it will then send you an email with a special link so that you can then log back into it. I will figure out how to make a little graphic for that for the website for you. And so some items to gather in preparation of the application are information about your facility capacity, your statistical information for 2020 and any previous years. You can download all of that information from umdata.org. Name of partners and groups who regularly use your facilities, and any of the following items, if you have them, you will not be penalized if you do not, which is your org chart, vision and mission statements, strategic plan, goals, and or orientation materials for new leaders and new members, your executive insight, comparative insight, and all of that comes with your MissionInsite, and your readiness 360 scores. If you do have any questions about this application process, you can sign up for a 15-minute consultation at any time between now and February 22nd. And the link again can be found at bwcumc.org/catalyst. And now back to Bill.
Thank you. If you could drop the slide presentation for a second, Kayla, we do have a question that came in that could be helpful. And I'm going to let anyone, Kayla or Christy, answer this. Someone's asking, what if you have a 2-point charge? How do you handle that type of application?
Great question. If both of your churches want to be in the Catalyst initiative, you will need to fill out the applications. Each church will need to fill out their application, and you'll just want to make note of the fact that you'd want to be in the same cohort together. That's what's going to be important for us to know. But it's important because in 2-point charges, each church has a separate identity and they will have different Readiness 360 scores. We will need to do some extra work to make a combined one, but each church will receive a separate Readiness 360. So we need both churches' information.
And David asked a great question. I think I know the answer to this. He's asking if this is mainly designed for larger churches. And I'm going to say, no, it's designed for all churches. We want all of our churches in the Baltimore-Washington Conference to discover their next faithful step, and we want to help them take it. The Catalyst Initiative is one way that we're going to equip and empower churches to take that next faithful step. And if you're not chosen this year, there's going to be some other opportunities. But what would you say to that, Christy?
Yeah, no, I would agree. This is a consultative. The application is a consultative process, whether your church is 12 people or more than 12 people. And again, as Bill's saying, part of what the application allows your church and us to know is what is the next step to get ready if the Catalyst cohort isn't for you at this point because you need to work on something to get ready. That will let us all know that. So it puts you on a path toward thriving, no matter your size. We know some of the most healthy churches are not our largest churches. Health comes in all shapes and sizes. So.
And someone's asking, I think we can tag team on this answer. What is the application evaluation criteria? And I want to say it's so vast that we don't have a check sheet at this point because it's going to be a combination of the data you provide on the application. So for Christine, who's asking the question, when you look at the application, the material that comes in from that will go into the choosing who is in this first round of cohorts. Also, your Readiness 360 plays a part in that as well.
Yeah. And the good news is that once you've done this is also the pre-work for the cohort itself. And I think the other piece is the thing to know is that the Lilly Foundation specifically required that the persons who were beneficiaries of this grant were quote unquote healthy congregations. So we also, that's part of what we're looking, and health comes again, health is a wide ranging understanding. So if what you really need to do is spend the year getting your financial house in order, let's make that happen, and then come and do the cohort next year. So it really is designed to strengthen ministry, no matter what that looks like. And we're seeing this annual process as a way to really allow churches to continue to be in relationship with one another and with learning opportunities that are right for them, instead of doing an a la carte approach, but to really create a process that where we care for one another. The learning sprint that Bill talked about is we've all learned that, especially lay people, I'm a lay person, we can't always show up when the meeting is happening. So this learning sprint allows us to learn the same thing in the same 2-week period, talk with one another offline in an online, safe, closed environment. It really is, and that system will be used for cohorts other than, in addition to the Catalyst cohort. So we really are committed to being connectional and to helping one another, cheer one another on as we're working toward God-sized visions, toward whatever it is that we need to strengthen. So we're really excited about being able to partner with you all in this.
And we also have a question, who's involved in making the selection? So we have a team approach. In addition to Christy and myself and Kayla, we have members of the cabinet who will also be sitting on the selection team. And a lot of it is going to be based on your applications. And again, this is year 1 of a 5-year program. So we're targeting with a pilot of 16 churches. In year 2, we're going to add additional churches. I think we'll be up to, I want to say 24 additional churches. And then year 3, we're going to add even more, year 4. And hopefully even after year 5, maybe we'll get into such a rhythm that every single church in our annual conference will go through some form of the Catalyst initiative if we dream big beyond year 5. But right now we're just trying to get set into year 1, which is a pilot, so we can test everything. So we have a couple of questions on finances. So is having your financial house in order a prerequisite? And if, because of COVID, some of the churches are having financial challenges.
Yeah, that's a great question. I think we all, so the requirement looks different in COVID than it does not in COVID. Right. So we all know that all of us are having to reimagine budgets and how to what priorities to make. So I think I'll clarify the financial health. If the consuming thought for your leadership is how are we going to keep the lights on, this Catalyst initiative will not be for you, because it requires some margin for discernment, for experimentation, and so that's probably a better way to talk about financial stability.
And you'll even notice in the application, we take into account, and the questions are phrased in such a way to look at the challenges of COVID this particular year. But some of the information we'll be looking at goes back for 10 years. So it won't be just 2020 specific, because we all know that 2020 has been a very challenging year in a number of respects for our local congregations. Somebody is asking about the church leadership making a 3-year commitment to this process, but I would clarify it is a 10-month commitment to this process. So I'm not sure where the 3 years has come in, but we're looking, When you're selected for a cohort, the cohorts are 10-month, is a 10-month process.
I would say that coming out of the cohort, you won't be just, you'll be continuing to implement and test and iterate. So there will be a commitment beyond the 10 months in terms of making things stick, and depending on what it is that gets revealed to you in the process, it could be a longer than 3-year commitment, right? But the cohort itself is 10 months, as Bill said.
And how would pastoral changes or retirements affect a church in this process? And I would probably say, if you are a clergy person who is thinking of retiring at the end of June 2021, you may not want to apply for the Catalyst Initiative this year. If you're projecting out your retirement, as long as you can commit, I think, with your leadership team for that 10 months and wherever your retirement fits into that, pastoral changes is above my pay grade. So
Mine too.
That we don't know. And here's a really simple question. We've been throwing around a term that not everybody may know what the term means. What's a cohort, Christy?
Oh, a cohort is a group of people who think about covenant group. Covenant, it's a group that covenants together to learn, to share, to share that learning together. That's the simplest way to say it.
It's a small group that is learning together as well. Yeah, I think the covenant is a great way. And oh, well, I know we'll get into this, but we've already been asked, how much is this going to cost a local church?
Nothing.
Nothing.
Your time, your energy, your passion, your willingness to let go, that's what it's going to cost you, but nothing financially.
We received a generous grant through the Lilly Foundation, which is underwriting this process. So we're able to offer that. And I'm going to go with one more question, and then we'll move into some more content. How do we define a healthy church? We've used that phrase a few times.
Well, it looks different in your context. What health looks different in every context. And I think I saw a question around process being culturally competent. It's as you know, as a conference, we understand that one size does not fit all, that there are unique challenges in various communities. Part of what this learning management system allows us to do actually is to create content that is contextual, as we're also going through a shared process. So health is also contextual, is what I would say. And part of the outcome of the Catalyst Initiative is for your congregation to define what thriving looks like for it. Yeah, that's enough.
And the application process, I have to lean into this because we've sort of been submerged in creating this application process. It will give you a good snapshot of your strengths and weaknesses as a local congregation. And so the process of applying in and of itself will be a good eye-opening tool for your congregation to get a snapshot of your current reality. So we're gonna move on for a moment. We'll still get to your questions, but a big piece, if we can get back to our slide presentation, a big piece of our application, in addition to the Readiness 360, is a demographic study of your community. And the tool that the annual conference uses is called, we're not quite ready for Lauren, but we'll introduce her in a minute. We use a tool called MissionInsite, and MissionInsite is a demographic tool that we pay for as an annual conference to help you get to know on paper your community. And I'm going to introduce our video tonight is the Reverend Lauren Harris, who is the project administrator in the Office of Leadership and Congregational Development, and she is our contact person who we work with, who helps to facilitate our MissionInsite. And she's going to describe a little bit of how to do a report. And again, this video will be available after tonight's event.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Lauren Harris, and I work in the Office of Leadership and Congregational Development. And tonight, I'm going to walk you through MissionInsite to show you how to generate the reports that you need to submit your application for the Catalyst Initiative. Let's get started. Okay, so we have logged onto our computer. We are using Google Chrome. And the first thing that you're going to do is you're going to go to the MissionInsite website, which is www.missioninsight.com. And here you will see the option for client login. So we're going to go ahead and click that. Now you can see that my username and password are already populated in those spaces. So we're just going to click log in. If you do not have a MissionInsite account, you can email me and I will go ahead and set you up with that. If you have a MissionInsite account, but you can't remember your username or your password, there are two options right here under the login button that will assist you with getting your username or password. So now we're going to click log in. So the first page that you will see when you log into MissionInsite is Welcome to People View. Now these are the three different interfaces that MissionInsite gives us the option to use. We are going to choose Next Generation People View, which is the most recent interface for MissionInsite. So it's already selected and we're going to click Go. Now, we are on a page that says, which study would you like to work with? We can work with several different studies. Your church should be the church that pops up with your username and password. Now, because I am an administrator, I can run a study for any of the churches in the Baltimore-Washington conference, or I can run a report on the entire conference as a whole. But you will click your church, and for this evening's teaching purpose, I'm going to use Adams UMC as the example. So I'm going to click it, and it will bring me to the next page. What would you like to do? Now, for our purposes for generating the reports for the Catalyst Initiative application, we are going to look to our bottom right where it says, I want to work with my data directly on the map. So go ahead and click skip and go directly to the map. All right. So after we have clicked that option, you will see our map to the left of the screen with the church that we are focusing on for this evening, Adams UMC, with the church icon. So let's get into generating the reports that we need for the application. Go to the bottom of your screen and you will find a menu that says View, Layers, Shapes, Plotting, Demographics, Recent, and Help. We are going to choose the Shapes option. So I have just clicked the Shapes option and it has given me an option for drawing settings. So Basic is already clicked here. We're going to leave it at Basic for our reports. Now we're going to scroll down and it says draw a polygon, a rectangle, a circle, draw a polyline, or a freehand polygon. For our reports that we need for the application, we are going to select the first option, draw a polygon. Click it. Now scroll down your menu on the right of your screen to travel polygons, and you will find three different options that we can choose from. Now, our report will give us the distance from your church, driving with the car icon, walking with the man icon, or biking with our last icon. Now, we are going to select our starting location where we want our 20-minute drive to be plotted from, and we are going to select that point on the map. And so we are going to click our church on the map. I have clicked the church and our menu says, got it, press next to continue. So we are going to click next. All right, so the menu has brought us to the time contours option, and this is where you are going to specify how far from your starting point that you want this report to represent. And so, because the Catalyst Initiative asks for a 20-minute drive or a 7-minute drive, depending on the location of your church, you're going to choose 20 minutes or 7 minutes. So for tonight's purposes, we're going to type in 20 minutes. And now you go and click next. All right, so the menu has brought us to the resolutions option. And so we're going to leave it at the highest resolution so that we can see the most points on our map. But there are also a low and medium option for the resolution of your final map that they will use to generate your report. Now you will click draw. After clicking draw, you will see that the map has generated our 20-minute drive from Adams UMC. And so now that it has mapped out on our map the 20-minute drive that we need, we are going to go back down to the menu on the bottom of our screen, and we're going to click demographics. All right, so our menu to the right of our screen has changed. You will see custom reports and predefined reports. We are sticking with the predefined reports. You will see that it says prepared for Baltimore-Washington Conference, UMC. You can leave that as it is. Our study area is 20-minute drive from our address, the address of our church. It's a little bit off because I used the map to click my point on the church, but you also have the option to enter in your church address directly. All right, so now it says select a predefined report. The first report that you want to run is Executive Insight, so you are going to click that. Now it says generate report, click that. MissionInsite program generates the report and downloads it as a PDF to your computer that will appear in the bottom left of your screen. Now, because I have run several reports today, my report is named Executive Insight 7, and your report looks just like this. Now I'm going to close this and go back to the MissionInsite. And you also need the Ministry Insight report. So we are going to click that report, Ministry Insight, and we are going to generate that report. MissionInsite is generating that report, and it's going to automatically download it as a PDF to my computer. Now, when I download documents from programs on the internet to my computer, it goes into my downloads folder, but MissionInsite puts the report at the bottom left of your screen. You can open it up, and here we have the Ministry Insight report for Adams UMC in Lothian, Maryland. Okay, so we hope that tutorial on how to generate the Executive and Ministry Insight reports were very helpful to you. Now, the Comparative Insight report that you also need for the application for the Catalyst Initiative is a little bit more complicated. There's an additional step of people plotting where you will plot the addresses of the people in your congregation. So let's take a look at this brief tutorial on how to plot the people.
we're going to have that brief tutorial available online for you to look at when it comes time for you to fill out that part of the application. If we could close that PowerPoint real quick for a second, Kayla. I want to say something about MissionInsite, and if Christy's available, she can come on as well. When you have the MissionInsite report, it's going to tell you of a lot of information, and I'm going to ask Christy, you sent that link just to me in the chat, so if you could send it to everyone in our attendees as well. There we go. So you'll be able to click on that, and it's going to provide you a lot of demographic information, number of people in the study area, racial breakdowns, economic breakdowns, household breakdowns, all of that type of education levels, all of that type of information. It's also going to give you some information like preferences of music styles, preferences of leadership styles, preferences of small groups or self-help groups. And a lot of that information you may look at and say, how do they really know this is right? How do they know this is correct? How do they know without talking to people in my community? And I had that same exact question. And so a couple of years ago, I think it was summer of 2019, I met with the president of MissionInsite, and I just said to him, how do you know that all of this information is correct? And I don't know if you've heard that story, Christy, but they use a group called Experian. And Experian, you may recognize the commercials of the Experian Boost. And a lot of people think Experian is just a credit monitoring company, but it is also a data gathering company. So every time you, for example, every time I go to Starbucks and if I use my credit card or debit card to pay, Experian gets that data, and they know that people who live where I live, who are my demographic makeup, like this kind of coffee at Starbucks. And all of that information of our buying habits and our viewing habits and our searching habits is categorized by the Experian company and is used. I'm sure some people use it for marketing. We're using it for good to find out who is in our community. And then what I did was I took that information from MissionInsite that's on paper, and I began walking around my community while I was serving a local church, and it matched. And it was really amazing to see how accurate. And I know you've used MissionInsite a lot, Christy. So here's the question. How do you deal with how do you handle demographic areas that are overlapping with other churches?
Oh, so great question. There's, we could spend a whole, maybe we should sometime spend a whole night on this, because first of all, I think a lot of churches draw their mission field too broadly. So part of the reason why most churches seek to draw their circle as wide as all their membership versus defining their community. So in an urban community, it might be a 20-minute walk. In a suburban community, it might be a 7-minute drive. In the country, it might be more like a 20-minute drive. So sometimes there's an overlap with other churches because we're drawing our circle too wide, and sometimes it's because of the legacy of racism in the United Methodist Church, where we have a Black church and a white church on the same block. So part of what the comparative insights allows you to do is upload and compare how is it that our congregation echoes or doesn't echo the community, and every church will see it is overrepresenting some people groups and underrepresenting other people groups, and it becomes a really important discussion to have, to sort of say, why is that, and take a look at what we have in common, and in addition to what the differences are. We know one another really well, and sometimes we don't take the time to actually build relationships with others. And I think one of the reasons I like MissionInsite, it sort of lowers the fear barrier. So it doesn't replace the need to build personal relationship, but it lowers the fear barrier and starts creating a common language and understanding about who is our church currently positioned to serve better than other persons, and what does God have to say about that.
And I've often said that there are enough people in our communities who are not in a relationship with any church, that we have enough. There's enough people to go around. I mean, there's enough. The mission field is ripe, and so we're not talking about stepping on other churches' toes. But if you're in the same community, you're going to get some of the same results. Particularly, you talk about some of the history, Christy, which is so true. And we're also one of the few annual conferences that has every predecessor denomination that forms the United Methodist Church in it. So we have, Methodist Episcopal South, Methodist Protestant, Evangelical, United Brethren, EUB, and all of that forming the United Methodist Church. So there's a lot of us around here. And so we are going to overlap, but that's okay. And since we have you here, the next piece of our application process is the Readiness 360. If you could walk us through that, please.
And we'll start right with the video, and then we'll talk about Readiness 360.
Once upon a time, there was a very clever rabbit named, well, Rabbit. Rabbit invented a game called chess and went to show the king. The king loved the game. He played it all day. In fact, he enjoyed it so much he wanted to reward Rabbit. Rabbit said no at first, but the king insisted. So Rabbit said, "Give me some grain to eat, enough to cover my chessboard. 1 grain in the first square, 2 on the second, 4 in the next, and so on, doubling the grain all the way to the 64th square." But the king protested. "This is too little," forgetting that rabbits know a few things about multiplication. So the king's accountant began to calculate the payment. It took him 2 years to make the calculations. Finally, he came to the king with very bad news.
"Your Majesty, if we multiply 1 grain by 2, doubling it 64 times, it is enough grain to cover the whole kingdom. Indeed, the whole country of India, 50 feet deep. To pay your debt to Rabbit, you would have to give away your kingdom."
But the king had another idea. He got rid of Rabbit. However, while the accountant had been doing his math, Rabbit had been doing some multiplication of her own. With only 1 month's gestation, an average of 8 rabbits to a litter, and 4 months until adulthood, 6,000 rabbits were created in the 2 years it took the accountant to check his figures. When Rabbit's fate was discovered, her offspring formed an army. They overthrew the king and lived happily ever after in what became known as the Kingdom of Rabbits.
The world belongs to those who multiply.
So I thought we'd share with you that silly little cartoon, and I hope you learned something in that, right? But I have a question for you in the chat. Bill is going to open the chat for you to answer this question. Listen, thinking about that video and this power of multiplication, what does multiplication have to do with your church? And go ahead and just quickly, usually in a live session, we'd be doing this with popcorn style, but I would love to hear just in the chat, what does multiplication have to do with your church? I'm gonna let you growth, and it's not additional, like 1 by 1. Increase, if each one can reach a couple of people and keep going, we could really change the whole community. Amen, amen. Making disciples, right? Making disciples is this, if we look at the book of Acts, right? Acts 2, we see this multiplicative effect. Increase the number of relationships, scaling connections, and it doesn't take a lot. This goes back to the question about, is this just for large churches? It only takes 2. In this video, right? It only takes 2. Perseverance, yes, changing the world. One of the churches that I was using this Readiness 360 with talked about how we have to be careful what we're multiplying. Are we multiplying good? Are we overturning evil and systems of oppression, right? Like this exponential growth is a part of the Jesus DNA. And so we'll just go to the next slide and talk about the Readiness 360 really seeks to measure the soil of, the parable of the sower is really the focus is we keep, our job is to keep sowing seed and not worry about the state of the soil. And if a congregation soil has discipleship DNA in it, has this multiplying DNA in it, it will grow good seed. So in our work as consultants, we know that when you take an idea and plant it in one soil, it doesn't grow the same way that it grows in another soil. Some of that can be a Kairos thing, but there are actually 4 different elements in the soil of churches that matter in terms of whether or not a church is ready to multiply its ministry. And that's part of what we're sort of building into our understanding of how we're equipping you to multiply disciples of Jesus Christ for the transformation of the world. So one of the aspects that we measure is something that we call spiritual intensity. You can go to the next slide. This is a great story about whether, and it really is speaking to whether or not you are living a firsthand Pentecost experience or if it's a handed down faith, right? We know that every great movement of the church comes by being deeply rooted and on fire for Jesus. Amen. So that's one aspect that gets measured in the Readiness 360. Then another aspect that gets measured on the next slide, I'm gonna do them in order, is how much we have alignment around the mission. Are we keeping the main thing, or are we spending time and energy focused on stuff that's just pleasing us? So there's a set of 18 or so questions that are really trying to gauge what are you willing to sacrifice for the mission of discipleship? These questions are not normal questions in the sense that you can necessarily know which one is going to which thing. But we understand that from a soil health perspective and multiplying perspective, keeping the main thing, discipleship and alignment around disciple making for the transformation of the world, not for our own edification, is critical. The next thing is about dynamic relationships with one another, relationships with newer people, relationships with people in the community. How is conflict? Conflict is a natural part of any relationship or group. Is it healthy, the way in which we handle conflict? So again, and 18 questions are all around how able are we at this point in time to build positive relationships across all of those areas. And last but not least is cultural openness, which measures how open we are to people who are newer than us, younger than us, or different than us. And we know at this point in time that all 4 of these show up in research, show up in lived experiences, that make a difference between how hard it is to start something new versus how exciting it is to start something new. So if you go to the next slide, we like to just sort of give you an overview of what we measure in this instrument. It is an intensive process that's based on anonymous answers of as many in your congregation as you can get to take it. People will be asked to give their name, their role, like whether they're a paid staff, a leader, a member, a participant, or other, their age and longevity, so that we can cross-reference answers in the survey around those roles, and so that leaders in the church can make sure who has and hasn't taken it, and can make sure that there's a balanced look at that. But none of that information is attached to any of the answers. So it is an anonymous survey that also you have information about who's taken it. There are 75 Likert scale questions. So you are, strongly agree more than disagree more than agree, strongly disagree, don't know. And then there are 2 open-ended questions that are simply to become more effective at forming world transforming disciples. What do we need to stop doing, and what do we need to start or keep doing? And all of that data will be available to you to use. And as Bill's already alluded to in the report, there's a snapshot of each of the 4 areas and what are your strengths in those areas and what are the things that are limiters. We use this information, we encourage congregations to use this information to do strengths-based work because it's much easier and better and faster. It's all of those things to really be focusing on building upon strengths rather than filling in holes. So that's all that information would be given to you whether or not you're in the Catalyst, whether you or not you end up as a part of the cohort. So I think the next piece is to really talk about how we want, at least for a statistical perspective, we want at least 10% of your average worship attendance, and I would say your pre-COVID average worship attendance, or 25 people, whichever is larger. That's what's needed to complete the survey. But from our experience, the more people who provide input, the better, because what happens is if people have invested the time in answering all of those questions, they're going to be interested and more invested in the results that come from that and wanting to be a part of the continued dialogue. So I'm just going to give you some strategies that other churches have used to maximize participation. Extending personal invitations to each ministry group and particular people groups. I add that particular people groups because it's really important that you have some newer members in there reporting on how it feels to be a newer member or what they think about how the church incorporates newer people to leadership. In some of our churches, by the way, new members are we count as 0 to 3. And then I'm not remembering the term that we use for the 4 to 12 year. I don't even remember what that second tier is, but sometimes new, quote unquote, new members are older than you think. Like the newest members might be the most excited on board, and it's sort of that middle group. And so it gives you that kind of data too. Participants who haven't joined the church yet, but have been hanging around, we encourage you to have those persons get a personal invitation. And young people, we love our young people. Anyone 12 and up is perfectly capable of completing this survey, and we would encourage you to extend personal invitations there. Develop strategies for those who don't feel comfortable navigating an online survey. Churches have been very creative here. They've done everything from a cafe, so like even in the virtual world, you could have, y'all come and we'll set up appointments and we can walk you through it. We've had young people sometimes get on the phone and do the survey orally with folks. Young people tend to be more candid, is what our experience has been, which is why that's been one strategy that people have used. Some people, and this is pre-COVID, would actually go and visit people and bring their laptop with them. So for your congregation, for their needs, this is not a survey that can be printed out and completed on paper. It has to be done online, because every time, in order to keep our validity going correctly, we have to have the survey mixed up every time. So when you print it, it's not the same as the next time you go in to enter it. So for every one survey that would take 15 to 30 minutes, depending on how wordy and how quick you are and whether or not you're paying attention or multitasking, you have to, it'll take an hour to input that data because you have to find the question to enter it. So we don't recommend that you try and print it out. You will be able to, Lauren will also be helping manage the setup of your Readiness 360. You'll be able to check in on your own dashboard to see who has completed it that you've invited and who hasn't. So you'll be able to keep abreast of who you need to continue to ask, because we know that people have a lot going on right now. So I think if there are questions that people have, we'll let Bill do his thing and moderate us in question asking.
If you have questions, go to the Q&A. I'll start the questions on the Readiness 360.
Okay.
How do we know the validity of this tool, that it's going to give us some good answers based on the
So
information people supply?
yeah, so this tool has been validated by practically and in hundreds of churches in many different, name the context, and it's been taken not just in the US and also abroad. It's a predictor of when it started, it was in 2007 on paper, and as it evolved, what the current instrument is has been used in a way that allows congregational developers and consultants to be able to go in and sort of laser focus on what will help a congregation live out their next faithful step over and over and over again, even against what some people might say. So I appreciate the question around health. So sometimes we surprise people by saying, you know what, this is a really healthy church. They don't understand how healthy they are because of other factors that people may not see. So it's a GPS, as Paul Nixon says. It's also sort of like a MRI scan that allows us to see the spirit of a place in a way that metrics like worship attendance and offerings and that kind of thing just don't.
And you bring up a very good point. So when people look at this whole application, and you have to look at it in its entirety, one piece of the application is going to look at the usual metrics we always think of when it comes to church health, but that's not the only thing, nor is it the most important thing we'll look at. The Readiness 360 is a huge piece of this application, and I would tell everybody who's participating tonight to please apply, because if nothing else, the Readiness 360 report and the tips that are generated for your local church to begin to work on, you can begin working on them the day after they come out, is so beneficial. As I said, I've used it twice with a congregation and found it to be so helpful. And the debriefs that we will be doing with local churches to walk them through the results, to help you understand what they mean, to help you process what the information is saying, it's worth the price of admission.
And I do know that there's a question out there around cultural sensitivity and whether or not this is applicable in white churches or multi-ethnic churches or African-American churches. And when I was the Greater Washington strategist, Joe Daniels and I would use this tool. We've used it in churches in Bermuda. We used it in a church. Just did a consultation for a church in Cleveland. It is one of those pieces that we use at Emory, that he and I use when we consult outside of the conference as well.
So we've got a great question. Is the Readiness 360 fee covered as part of the grant, or do we handle that cost as individual congregations? I want to answer this because I love saying it. It will cost your church to apply nothing. So the grant does cover part of the Readiness 360 fee. Your apportionment dollars also cover when we use Readiness 360 outside of the grant period. Mission shares and apportionment dollars have covered that cost. So we want to really say that this is not going to, at least to apply. There could be some costs in terms of if your church develops a project that you want to implement, there could be a cost with that. But for the training, for the cohorts, for the application, there is no cost. For the retreats, that is all covered under the grant. That's why it's such a comprehensive grant, and such an initiative as we have not really done in this annual conference of such a broad scope. So someone says, I don't know if it's a question or statement. As we consider seed planting and soil condition, I would add for this question or health, talk about church life and ministry in a post-COVID world. there is no better time to be undertaking this Catalyst initiative
Yeah.
than in this post-COVID world.
Yes. Yeah.
I'll
Right.
look at some of the other questions.
Yeah, no, I think if you've had an opportunity, we're going to play a little bit of the invitation video that Bishop Easterling created, but it really is, it is exactly the time to be, even in the midst of a really horrible, someone else says, in a really horrible state in the nation, a state, it is the right time to say, who are we? Whose are we? What is our core value and mission, and how and who are we called to be in relationship with, and to build it? You're not going to be able to answer what does the church look like post-COVID outside of your own ministry context. One of the things when we were working, one of the things that is really exciting for Bill and I, and Rodney, when we were all talking about it, was how are we bringing the best of every tool that we've been exposed to and everything that we've done in the world of innovative ministry. So some people were asking about Ministry Hatchery and Changemakers Project and how that's related to this. We have put into this cohort process the best experiences to help you answer that question in your context for your church. And we're committed to working with you to get ready. If you're not ready this year, we're committed. We are committed to help you get ready so that you're ready for a subsequent year.
I would also say we have some of our churches in our annual conference who I would say are beyond the Catalyst initiative. And this application process might help identify that the Catalyst initiative may not be for you, but here's another option of something for you. Somebody else asked about the New People, New Places, a partnership that has been created with Path One and Discipleship Ministries to do fresh expressions through a Wesleyan lens and a particular United Methodist lens. And so that is an option for a church that may, there could be churches who aren't quite ready for it, or there could be churches that are in a place that is beyond the need of something like the Catalyst initiative. Now, someone has asked if the Readiness 360 questions and answers are at all affected by the present pandemic. And I don't believe it asks for statistical information. So could you give us an example of some of these Likert scale questions? Like what kind of, off the top of your head, I'm sure you've memorized that.
Quickly pulling up a report.
Excellent. So I'll vamp a little bit. So we're going to give you some examples of what a question is, but it's not looking at statistics. It's looking at relationships and spiritual health that goes beyond the numbers.
Right. Thank you. Perfect timing. Our church is having success building new relationships with community people. Is an example of a question. I'm excited about the direction that our church is headed. At every level of our church, we grow people into servant leaders. Our church addresses conflict in healthy ways. New people quickly find or create their place of belonging or serving in our church. And right now, what I'm looking at, I'm going to give you a sneak peek. I can't give you a sneak peek. Can I share my screen? Do you think I can?
Since I'm in control of the meeting, yes, I think you can.
I'm going to just give you a snapshot because I think this is for those of us who do this work and try to say, there is danger in a single story. One of my favorite TED Talks, but there is danger in a single story, and lots of times our churches are operating under a narrative of whatever narrative is loudest or oldest. So I'm looking at an actual church's report. So acclimated is the name of that category. When we worship, I sense the nearness of God's Spirit. So this is just a snapshot of a question that's on exactly worded as it is on the survey, and how people and we're looking right now at longevity at the church. So new to the church are the most happy with worship, as opposed to the acclimated, right? When we worship, I sense the nearness of God's Spirit. So I think it's interesting that the acclimated new people quickly find or create their place of belonging or serving in our church. this just gives you an insight into how different layers in your church, different voices in your church are responding to the same question differently. So that's a deep dive and answers hopefully more than you asked and didn't overwhelm you. I will stop sharing. For those of you who don't like graphs.
So someone's asked about, they said, you said 25 people or 10%, which is whichever is greater to answer the survey. What if you only have 15 people in attendance at your local church? Do you have to find 10 people outside the church?
No, you have to have all 15 take the survey.
If you could have all 15 take the survey, that would be great, but it's or 10% of the 15, which is a very small number. So you want to try to get all 15. The 25 people is if you have a larger congregation than 15.
Yeah. So yeah. But we like,
if you had more than 25 people, if you had, let's stick with percentage. What if 20% of your congregation took the survey? Is that helpful? Is it detrimental?
No, we like as many people as possible. There's no limit to the number of people who can take it. We like, I mean, Paul really advocates for 30% is a good number a target to hit. Again, unless you're a smaller church, in which case you want everyone to take it.
And the last question that I see in our Q&A queue is, could you talk a little bit about the retreats? Are they all-day sessions? Are they multiple-day sessions? Do we know yet if they're going to be in person or virtual? Discuss.
Kayla and I want to see people. So we're like, in May, we'll find an outside place where we can all be together. But they're one-day sessions. If we have to do it online, we might break up the day because one day online is really, really hard, really difficult. So they're designed to be one day.
And they're also designed to take into consideration the schedules of laity. Mm-hmm. I mean, yes. That's a safe.
Yeah, they'll be on a Saturday. We'll be rolling those out momentarily.
I know our conference lay leader, Dolores Martin, I'll call her out by name, is on the call today because I can see lists of names. And I know she likes to remind us that this is a partnership between the clergy and the laity of our annual conference. So I think that really has to be lived out in the Catalyst Initiative, that your team has to be a partnership between your pastor and between the laity of the church for this to bear fruit.
Amen.
Amen. And so let me respond to one question. And while we're doing that, we're going to, in a minute, we're going to have a special guest close us out from part of her video that you can see the whole video on the conference YouTube page. We're going to get closed out and prayed for by our bishop. But before we move into that, Kayla, just a couple of announcements. We had planned a training Tuesday for next Tuesday, January 19th, which was going to cover the second round of the Paycheck Protection Program. We have found out tonight that it is ramping up much quicker than we had anticipated. So I received, literally before going on the air tonight, received a message from our conference CFO, Paul Eichelberger, asking us if we could move the training Tuesday. So we have. So we're going to have a training Tuesday, but on a Thursday, and it's going to be this Thursday, the day after tomorrow, January 14th at 7 p.m. An announcement is going out to all of the local churches tomorrow via email. If you already registered for the training Tuesday, which was going to be a week from today, you will receive an additional email with information of how to participate. But because the Paycheck Protection Program is first come, first served, we wanted to get information to the local churches as quickly as possible, how to apply for that. And so that's the common theme. Everything's about an application. So we want you to apply, of course, for paycheck protection if you qualify, but more importantly, we want you to apply for the Catalyst Initiative. And if you get confused, if you get challenged, if you get frustrated, if you get upset, before you punch your computer screen, reach out. We have set up some consultations and you can Sign up for a consultation if you have questions about the application process, and either myself or Christy or Kayla will connect with you and answer your questions so you know you're not going through this alone. There's a lot of resources that are on the conference website, but there will also be some personal one-on-one help for the application, and there'll also be some one-on-one and some group debriefs after the application to help you process what your next step is. Did we cover everything, Christy?
I think so.
I think we did, and then some. So we're going to hear from our bishop.
Beloved, one thing we know for sure: transformed lives transform lives. The Catalyst Initiative is an exciting new vehicle to support our shared mission of developing disciples of Jesus Christ for the transformation of the world. I pray you'll explore how your church can become involved with it. And now, in the words of Thomas Merton, I pray. My Lord God, we have no idea where we are going. We do not see the road ahead of us. We cannot know for certain where it will end, nor do we really know ourselves. And the fact that we think we are following your will does not mean that we are actually doing so. But we believe that the desire to please you does in fact please you. And we hope we have that desire in all that we are doing. We hope that we will never do anything apart from that desire. And we know that if we do this, you will lead us by the right road, though we may know nothing about it. Therefore, we will trust you always, though we may seem to be lost and in the shadow of death. We will not fear, for you are ever with us, and you will never leave us to face any perils alone. Amen and amen.
Have a wonderful night, and thank you for joining us.